This is Muzan Kibutsuji. You've probably heard of him. I mean, he's the main villain of the literal biggest anime of the past decade or so, but accolades aside, Muzan is a problem. A series of problems, actually. Problem number one. Muzan kinda accidentally turned into an immortal monster that hungers for human flesh and evaporates in the sunlight. Problem number two. The remedy for problem number one comes in the form of the blue wisteria, a rare flower that has eluded Muzan for centuries. Problem number three. Standing in the way of Muzan in his quest for this flower is the Ubuyashiki family, a family that has sworn to stop Muzan's reign of destruction in Japan by enlisting the help of fucking superpowered samurai child soldiers. And lastly, there's problem number four, perhaps the most damning of these problems actually. Muzan is an absolute fucking dumbass. See, Demon Slayer has this sort of conundrum where the odds are so overwhelmingly skewed in the favor of the bad guys that the only way this story can really go on is if the main villain is so grossly incompetent that he commits literal centuries worth of fumbles, and so lo and behold, our boy Muzan commits centuries worth of fumbles. Now for a long time, Muzan had the luxury of fumbling, right? The nigga was so overwhelmingly powerful compared to his ops, most of his ops at least, that he could afford to kind of just ignore them, put them off to the side. Sure, he probably could kill them all pretty easily if he just tried. I mean, he came face to face with the main character before said main character was strong enough to even break a hair on his head. But you see, that brings us into problem number five actually. Muzan is a hoe ass nigga. You see, 2 centuries ago, Muzan was spanked by a nigga that was essentially Samurai Jesus. It was the closest he had been to dying in his entire immortal life, and so, like a kid who had been scared straight by his pop's belt, Muzan was basically PTSD'd into inaction and would spend the rest of his days enlisting other niggas to go handle his light work in fear of the mere possibility that he might one day live to see another ass whooping. Now, like I said earlier, for a long time, our boy Muzan had the luxury of fumbling. He had the luxury of just dawdling around for centuries, passively trying to reach his goal of true immortality. But when a 14-year-old girl accidentally reaches this goal before him, oh hell nah, bro. That nigga Muzan is about tight as hell, because how is a literal 14-year-old about to be given the powers that he spent the past 1400 years fiending for? Something's not adding up to Muzan. And so he decides, you know what? I think it's high time I take matters into my own hands. I need to get me this 14-year-old girl, pause. And I need to reabsorb her essence back into my own, pause, so that I can finally obtain true immortality. And so he goes to do just that. For the first time in centuries, our boy Muzan jumps up off his buns and goes to do something useful with his life. But you see, here's where we run into problem number 4 again, the one about Muzan being a dumbass. Muzan is still a dumbass. You remember Ubuyashiki, right? Muzan's biggest op that we discussed a bit earlier? Yeah, well, word gets around to Muzan that old Ubuyashiki isn't doing too hot. You see, Ubuyashiki has like this cursed cancer, blindness, tuberculosis, HIV hybrid. I really don't know what homeboy has, to be honest, but it's bad. And it's gotten to the point where the doctors are telling him that he has mere days left on the clock. Now, if there is one moment in this story, one moment where Muzan should have stuck with being his usual passive, inactive self, it is this moment right here. He literally has God himself about to wipe the biggest threat to his plans off the map due to natural causes. All he needs to do to gain even more of an upper hand than he already has is do exactly what he's been doing for the past millennia. Absolutely nothing. He's let 96 Ubuyashikis go out this way. A lot of these niggas he probably hasn't even seen in person. Why switch it up now that your plan is finally starting to miraculously make some sort of headway? But you know what they say, right? The ego kills, bruh. Muzan decides that instead of just laying low and attacking the enemy at their weakest, which is literally like in a day after he dies, he'd rather go ahead and attack the enemy on their terms. He'd rather approach the enemy while the ball is in their court, because of course his dumbass would. Why would he ever decide to put himself in an advantageous situation? On the other hand, we have Ubuyashiki. Ubuyashiki, despite his dilapidated state, is still the embodiment of 96 generations of Muzan hatred. He is the culmination of a millennia's worth of plotting and anti-Muzan tactics, and so when he sees Muzan pull up at his front door while he's on his deathbed, oh, that boy's ready. Ubuyashiki Unlike Muzan, he knows how to execute a plan. He knows how to execute a plan very well, in fact. You see, him and his forefathers, they don't really have the convenience of an immortal body like Muzan, and so to even stand a fighting chance against the guy, they have to rely on tactics and future sight and super swordplay children, but a lot of tactics too. And so what happens when you combine these genius tactics with the future sight and the super sword children, and then you sprinkle on a little bit of nothing to lose just to spice things up a little bit? You get the perfect trap for this dumbass nigga named Muzan. Muzan walks up to Ubuyashiki's deathbed like he's already won the fight. He put on his cleanest threads for their fated meeting. All white suit, black tie, black overcoat. If there's one area where Muzan isn't absolutely mentally dumb, it's his drip. I'll give credit where credit is due. The nigga knows how to put that shit on. But anyway, Muzan, who really only came to talk shit, quickly finds that he's not the one talking shit. In fact, he's struggling to even sneak in a word edgewise as Ubuyashiki is popping off at the mouth crazy, frying this nigga in front of his wife and kids. The kids ain't even paying no attention to Muzan at all. They're over there playing taps or some shit. What has this family so emboldened in the face of a literal demon king? Ubuyashiki suicide bombs. He blows up his house with himself, his wife, his kids, and Muzan Kibutsuji all there to suffer the brunt of the attack. The humans in attendance all evaporate into nothingness within seconds of the explosion, but the immortal demon in their midst, he isn't so lucky. Muzan is now fighting the biggest L he's ever had to face since Samurai Jesus. The demon, who usually brushes off injuries in an instant, is now struggling to regenerate. But to make matters worse, and this is where Ubuyashiki's true genius shines through, the detonation of the Ubuyashiki estate wasn't just a well-timed explosion done to put Muzan through hell for a few seconds. It was a signal. A signal for all of the superpowered samurai within the area to converge on this one point where they would find their ultimate enemy delivered to them on a silver platter while in a weakened, compromised state. See, Muzan's goofy ass thought he was just gonna pull up to the crib and run an easy squabble with a dead man walking, but thanks to Ubuyashiki hitting that boy with the most clap tactics of 1926, Muzan now finds himself having to fade two mentally ill niggas, two PhDs, the literal main character, an e-girl, a nonchalant dreadhead, Mr. Olympia, and worst of all, an emo nigga. Studies show that upwards of 95% of anime villain plans are foiled by an emo nigga. If this encounter right here showed me anything, it's that all in all, Muzan just isn't what he should be, bruh. As the main villain of an anime, Muzan has got to be the first one that I've seen get jumped into the last act of the story against his will. Aren't the villains usually supposed to be the ones catching the heroes off guard?